next panel, we have Emily from ChainSecurity, who will be moderating. And we've got this mic for you.
Hello, can I call my panelists on stage, please? Can you try to set the same order as this?
Good. We got it right. Yeah.
All right. What time is it? 24. Okay, let's wait one. Hi, everybody. So we're still waiting for one panelist, but I guess we can start. I can start introducing myself, maybe, because we don't need him for that. I'm Emily from ChainSecurity. We are smart contract auditors. We are the bug people. If you've seen bugs everywhere, feel free to get them. You know, the wordplay is that we find bugs and we give them to you. So yeah. I am very happy to have here this staking panel. I think it's pretty much what everybody's talking about at the moment with EigenLayer and restaking. So we'll try to tackle this. The three topics we're going to discuss today, restaking and EigenLayer. We're going to spend half of the time talking about this. Then 5 to 10 minutes talking about DVT, distributed validator technology, and then talking more in general about decentralization and solo stakers. And if we have a little time, we would talk about rainbow staking, but if, you know, if we're very fast. All right, so I guess let's not wait for Paul. Maybe can we start with some intros? Can you introduce yourself super quickly? Your name, your role, what is your project, and who's your main client, and what value do you offer for them? You want to start? You seem very in the starting blocks.
Is that on? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. My name is Ben. I'm a senior protocol specialist at Figment, covering the Ethereum ecosystem. So folks not as aware, Figment, we're an institutional staking service provider. We're on something like 36 networks. Historically, our focus has been on institutional token holders, but we're broadening a little bit now. For instance, we have the Fig app, so you know, kind of DIY stakers can use that and effectively get access to our back end.
Can you hear me? My name is Glenn. I head a product at a company called Kiln. We're a staking service provider. We also do DeFi yield aggregation. We focus on many different segments, so institutional, we have a retail offering, and we also have a white label solution that a lot of custodians and our wallets are also plugged into.
This is yeah, it's working. Raul, I'm co-founder of Diva Staking and also co-founder of the Nectar network. Diva Staking is a liquid staking protocol based on DVT, and the Nectar network is a restaking layer. Actually, a multi-layer restaking layer, aiming to provide an alternative solution in the world of restaking.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so let's start with a quick overview. What is restaking and why does it matter in just a few words, just to kind of, you know, scratch the surface? Ben.
Yeah, so I think in the simplest terms, restaking is about securing multiple protocols with the same stake. This isn't a new idea. So you look at some networks like Polkadot, like Cosmos, you hear about things like shared security, replicated security. That's ultimately what we're talking about. Why this is so exciting now, of course, the launch of EigenLayer, or at least the second stage of EigenLayer, the launch of EigenD, and the ability to delegate to an operator. But effectively, it's securing multiple protocols with the same stake. That's the idea of restaking.
Thank you. Glenn or Raul, you want to add something? Or maybe say it in different words so that we really get the picture?
I mean, from my point of view, I think it's exactly the same. Like Ben said, at the end of the day, restaking is no more than securing other layers with the, in this case, Ethereum, or translating Ethereum security to other layers and to other services, so they can benefit out of that network of operators, of a network of validators that we have in the Ethereum network, and also the security, the economic security that is being provided throughout the Ethereum network itself.
Yeah, and everything these guys said, but I think also the innovation that it enables and the speed of innovation. So the new projects that can build on top of this quite quickly without having to create their own kind of source of, that backbone. So they can very easily build on top of that, and we're seeing that already.
All right. So the different actors in the Eigenlayer ecosystem. We have the restakers, we have the LRT protocols, the AVSs, actively validated services, and the operators. Can you tell me what are the goals and the risks of each of these actors and how they interact with each other? Maybe we can start with the restakers. What do the restaker want and what do they risk?
More money?
More money. That is, the usual.
No, I mean, put it on nicer terms. I will say that the restakers at the end of the day is people who is willing to take an additional risk, delegating their ETH to other actors within the network. So they are willing to delegate their ETH to operators so they can perform additional duties. And yes, obviously in exchange of for higher reward.
And what do they risk more?
Because actually what they are doing is, they are risking more because actually they are facing other dangers. At the end of the day, what the difference with restaking and what you are getting with restaking is that you enable the operators to perform additional services to those AVSs. So that increases the chances for that operator to be slashed. And actually, that increases the chances for your ETH to be slashed.
Okay, so they don't only risk getting slashed on Ethereum, but also through the different AVSs, so increased slashing risk.
Yeah, but it gives you also exponential returns because each one of the AVSs gives you rewards.
Okay, thank you. Something to add on restakers, or can we move to the LRT protocols?
No, I mean everything Raul said, but I think the restakers are just widening their. It's not really an attack surface, but they're opening that attack surface to their staked cryptocurrency. So it's just adding that additional risk.
And I guess just kind of one nuance to add. Obviously, from a staker's perspective, as mentioned already, rewards are very interesting in terms of why restakers would be interested in restaking. But I think there's a slight nuance here. And so folks that have been following Ethereum for a little while, you've heard of things like MEV burn, minimum viable issuance. This idea that the Ethereum core community being Ethereum Foundation and core devs, can reduce the reward rate for validators. I think that in addition to providing more rewards, restaking has the potential to give stakers more agency back. By opting into restaking, you can choose the operator and you can have more control over your risk reward profile. So I think that's really important.
Okay. So we're going to talk more about the operators as well, and I think Kiln is an example of an Eigenlayer operator. The LRT protocols. What do they want? What do they risk? And can you give some examples of LRT protocols?
Yeah, I can jump in. So there are a handful of LRTs you may have heard of. So EtherFi, Renzo, Rio. And I think from a high level, the concept of LRTs are relatively straightforward. Think about an LST, liquid staking protocol or liquid staking token. The concept with an LRT is very similar. You deposit your ETH or your LST on the LRT protocol, and you get back a liquid restaking token. But unlike an LST, the LRT protocol is not just staking your ETH, they're restaking. Okay, so they're going to be staking on Eigenlayer, and then they'll be delegating to an operator. So I think on the surface, what's happening looks very similar to an LST, but one of the key pieces underneath is managing which operators they're delegating to, and then understanding which AVSs they're involved with, because as already mentioned, every additional AVS you're securing, or every time you hear AVS or actively validated service, just think protocol that's built on Eigenlayer. But every time as a restaker, every time that you're securing an additional AVS, you're adding incremental risk. So these LRTs will have to manage that risk and understand it, to just know all the AVSs that they've opted into through delegating to operators.
Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to add that, to what Ben has explained perfectly, and just to speak a little bit about my book, that one of the main differences, you were comparing them with the LSTs, and you were talking about the increased risk that the AVS is posed to the whole ecosystem. One of the main difference between an LRT and an LSC is that in an LSC, you are fully dependent on the Ethereum network, actually. You are building on top of the Ethereum network. With an LRT, at least if with the ones that are doing native restaking ones, they are building on top of EigenLayer, on top of Karak, or on top of us, or any other of the solutions that are out there. So actually, the dependency and the risk changes dramatically in a sense, because you are not building on top of Ethereum itself, you are building on top of something else.
And yeah, EigenLayer is at its infancy, right? So it's not yet battle tested. So this is also an additional risk. So we talked a lot about AVSs already. Can we define these a bit better? And again, same thing. What do they want? What do they risk? So AVS, actively validated services.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in real quick, and then if anyone wants to add. So as I mentioned already, when you hear actively validated service, just think protocol built on EigenLayer. Unfortunately, I love to define that even more, but the thing is, with the EigenLayer, I think or AVS is built on EigenLayer, I should say. There's something like 60 today, give or take, I don't know, maybe a dozen or something like that, at various stages of development, and they run the gamut. They can be simple app chains on one side, all the way to full-blown protocols on the other. Like, you could build Ethereum on EigenLayer if you really wanted to. Additionally, these AVSs are not just limited to the Ethereum ecosystem. Most of them have focused on Ethereum-related services to L2s and things like that. But you can have things outside of Ethereum. I mean, at the end of the day, the AVSs are just looking to use some of the security, the so-called trust layer of Ethereum, to secure their protocols. That's really the only limitation. There are some other ones as well in terms of what can be used as that security. So whether it's ETH or LSTs or ERC20s. But aside from that, it's pretty open design space for AVSs.
Okay. You wanted to add something?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's perfectly clear. I mean, to me, the best definition that I found about an AVS is anything that want to bootstrap a network. So, literally.
Sounds good. All right, so moving to operators, and maybe this time, Glenn, you can take it. What is an operator? What do they want? What do they risk?
Yeah, so I guess the operator in the EigenLayer sort of world with AVSs is very similar to an operator on Ethereum who's running a validator. So we're running the software to validate the transactions or the services for each of those AVS protocols or services that we've opted into. So they provide the software, and obviously the operator is running that is running the validation service on those different things. So.
Okay, thank you. So I think that was kind of all the important actors, right, in the restaking landscape. Did we cover that?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, perfect. So now, what do you think about the current hype around EigenLayer? Did they finally launch, and how do you think that's going to impact the market?
If I have to jump in, I will say that actually EigenLayer, they've done great, and what they have done is to pose a new market vertical that we weren't aware of at the end of the day. I mean, I don't want to dig too deep into that. And well, first, I think we have to know that EigenLayer has not deployed yet, at least not fully. I mean, they have deployed something. But yes, it's fully functional, it's valid. I mean, it's awesome what they are doing. But one of the core functionalities of a restaking is slashing, and they haven't implemented yet, for example. But they've done great, and it's something that a ton of people weren't really, they didn't believe in, like even 6 months ago, and they have realized that once you understand the economics of restaking, actually it makes sense, and it can be extremely beneficial for the Ethereum network. I mean, if we can leverage the risk with the benefits that we can get out of it, I think it's one of the best opportunities that we can get in order to scale the Ethereum network.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, obviously so restaking as a concept, I think, is here to stay, and it's going to become probably a foundational part of the ecosystem. EigenLayer won't be the only game in town, and we're already seeing that. And I think there's a real risk to EigenLayer that the other projects that are coming through can see where they haven't done so well, and do a better job in that area. So around user experience, the way things are implemented, the way they execute. It's not to say that EigenLayer aren't good, because I think they are. but it's clearly still in development but making great progress.
I think just the one thing I'd add, specifically about EigenLayer, and it's a good question. Have they launched? Because as Raul pointed out, yes, lots of the pieces have launched. Lots of the pieces of EigenLayer have launched, but there's a lot that still has to be sorted. And as Raul mentioned, slashing is a big one. I think about this. It makes me think about the launch of Beacon Chain. So it seems like it's kind of following that minimum viable product, and there are these stages. So, when Beacon Chain launched, you had the two networks operating in parallel, and effectively what's happening on Beacon Chain is it was coming to consensus about its own state. There were no transaction payloads, in other words. It wasn't doing the heavy lifting of mainnet, which is still proof of work. Then you had the merge, so that was proof of stake taking over. And then about this time last year, you had Schuyler, so that validators could finally get their 32 ETH back. So Ethereum Beacon Chain, I should say, kind of evolved in this manner. It seems like EigenLayer is kind of taking a page out of that book, where it's like, there are these stages to get to the final product, and that kind of seems like where we're at with EigenLayer. And with that lack of information on rewards and penalties and things like that, there's additional risk. When things are opaque, there's of course more risk.
Yeah. One last thing that I would like to add is, as you were mentioning, the competitors that are coming behind EigenLayer are going to learn from them and trying to implement things better. I just wanted to point it out because at the end of the day, we are building a sort of competitor to EigenLayer, but at least in our case, we are not framing it in the sense of competition itself. So, okay, we are building an alternative to EigenLayer because we think actually that the ecosystem needs alternatives, and not everything needs to be concentrated within one single agent or one single protocol in this case. But at least in our case, personally, I never frame it in the sense of competition that I'm going to extract value out of EigenLayer to take advantage out of them. Everything that we are building, and I think most of the teams out there, is open source, is for the community, and although it's easier to speak in terms of competition, I guess.
Yeah, I think I chose my words wrong. Alternative is what I should have said, not competitive. Though.
Do you think we would, at some point, get into a discussion the same way that we have now for liquid staking providers, where some are bothered by the dominance of some actors? Do you think we're going to get to the same thing with EigenLayer and the alternatives? Is it a risk to have one main restaking provider?
Obviously, I'm taking this one. That is one of the reasons why we have built that. It's not that we are going to get to that phase under which we are going to have one dominant within the market. We are already there. Until 2 weeks ago, there was just EigenLayer. And also, when you were talking about restaking, you have spoken about the EigenLayer ecosystem because it's the only thing that is out there. So that implies a monopoly somehow, and I think is what we should try to avoid, because actually they have become really, really big. And they are doing great. Mm-hmm. But
when you say the product that you launched, you're talking about Nectar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we are already past our time to talk about restaking, but there's one thing I'd like to discuss still. It's about the risks of restaking, and specifically, people are talking about this cascade risk. So I'd love to hear kind of a concrete example of what this cascade risk could look like, a catastrophic failure type of scenario. Can you describe step by step how that could happen?
Me crying in a bathroom, maybe? No, maybe an operator can describe it better than myself. It will be, again, as of now, with the current implementation of EigenLayer, what they have launched to mainnet, it wouldn't impact that much because they don't have a slashing implemented once it is implemented.
No. Imagine in 2 years, everything is implemented, everything is deployed. What could happen? Maybe, Glenn, we haven't heard you too much. Maybe is this something you'd like to walk us through, or Ben?
Yeah, so to be frank, I'm not thinking about the cascade risk. To be frank, I don't see it as overly likely. But so the scenario would be something like if there were a mass slashing event. So you're already seeing a lot of interest in EigenLayer. So I think there's something like 4.5 million ETH that's been engaged on EigenLayer, whether through the LST route or through the direct path. In other words, creating an eigenpod and then activating the validator. So the idea is, if EigenLayer gets so big, and there's this mass slashing event, what does that do to the security of Ethereum itself? And so this is one of the criticisms you see when you see the debates between Shreeram Khanna, founder of EigenLayer, and Justin Drake or others from Ethereum Foundation. The idea that Ethereum has this so-called social layer, Ethereum core community, I should say, has this social layer where if there's a mass slashing event on Ethereum, the core community can step in and try and unwind that if it's not an attack on the network. And there would be a reason to do that. And the concern from Ethereum Foundation is that there is this cascade risk potentially on EigenLayer, and the Ethereum core community could be called on to step in to bail out risks that are taken on EigenLayer. So I think that's high level to cascade risk. I think a couple things to say there. First is there is this so-called slashing veto committee on EigenLayer. Now, again, we don't know what slashing is going to look like on EigenLayer yet, which is a bit of a pain point for folks. But apparently there is the slashing veto committee, so EigenLayer itself has its own kind of social layer, if you like. So they could step in and negate this mass slashing event if we're a bug or something like that, not an attack on EigenLayer. The other thing, too, there are researchers at Ethereum that are looking at ways to kind of solve this issue. And one issue, which is kind of related, is that there's an asymmetry about ETH stake. So EigenLayer uses an Oracle process to see how much ETH a validator has on Beacon Chain, but Beacon Chain doesn't have the same visibility to post-exit balances on EigenLayer, meaning if there was a mass slashing event, Beacon Chain wouldn't necessarily know about it, and that's a problem. So if this interests you, just as an aside, check out Barnabé Monod. He's done a piece on this. He's a Ethereum researcher. This asymmetry. I think that is something that's important that's going to have to be worked out in the medium to long term.
Thank you. Some other risks of restaking we should touch upon before moving to DVT, because we don't have that much time left.
I think just one thing. Sorry, I don't know, Glenn, if you wanted to. Okay. Well, just I think the obvious thing, and I won't go into too much because I've already talked a little bit, but the obvious point here is that you're securing additional protocols with the same stake. You're necessarily stretching the stake. So I think that's kind of the one of the top kind of headline risks. There is nuance there, though. So that's another risk, I guess, just to be mindful of.
Yeah, and maybe not a huge risk, but people chasing yields, and with the alternatives or the competition between the different LRTs, maybe offering unsustainably higher yield, which could then obviously is not sustainable. So if they're cutting corners, if they're taking other risks, maybe higher risks that are hidden, that could obviously directly affect users who are restaking.
Maybe I will add that I'm really curious to really understand how those omni-asset protocols are going to work. Because at the end of the day, that is pure risk management. I mean, the moment that you are putting different assets in order actually to validate in Ethereum, at the end of the day, you have to convert it to Ethereum one way or the other, because otherwise you are kind of backing that with thin air. So I'm really curious to see how that is going to be implemented and what are going to be the risks associated to that.
All right. So I heard that DVT, distributed validator technology, can help mitigate some risks of restaking. So in a few words, what is DVT and why does it matter?
DVT is distribution validation technology, obviously, and basically, I mean, what we want to call it, or we want to explain it as a layer 2 for validation. At the end of the day, through DVT, what you are doing is in a peer-to-peer manner, coordinating different people in order to confirm one validator. So it's a decentralized network over the Ethereum network in order to perform validation duties.
So I guess reducing the risk of each of the participants.
Exactly. I mean, in terms of risk, yes, obviously the risk and one of the benefits, or the major benefit that it brings, is more resiliency. Is through using DVT, actually, even if 1/3 of the whole subset of operators or validators is down, the cluster still works. So it's way more resilient.
And I guess just kind of doubling down on what Raul said. I think one of the early blog posts from one of the DVT protocols, they use the analogy of airplanes. So you can have a single engine aircraft. That's single validator. When you think about DVT, all you're doing is making that a multi-engine aircraft. So if you're flying along, and let's say a 4-engine commercial aircraft, and you lose one of the engines, the plane doesn't go down. That's the high-level concept with DVT for folks that aren't as aware. The other thing to highlight there with that analogy is that it's active-active redundancy, meaning that some operators today will have a failover, meaning you run your primary validator stack, and then if that goes down, you spin up a backup. That's passive redundancy, but active-active means that all the validators in that node, let's say you've got 5 validators or 5 operators in a node in a DV cluster, they're all operating at the same time, just the same way that the engines on a multi-engine aircraft are behaving. So from a high level, that's DVT.
And I think DVT is also interesting in the sense that you could have these kind of big liquid staking providers, for example, Lido, that implemented this DVT within Lido. So even by keeping this ecosystem, you can decentralize it while staying in it, right? So actually, ChainSecurity audited this staking router for Lido, so this is why I have that in mind. So how can DVT mitigate the risks of restaking?
I think it's double down again on what Ben just pointed out. You are eliminating single product failures, and I mean within the ecosystem. Is that redundancy that Ben was mentioning? If you are implementing DVT within restaking, actually what you are creating is a safe network or a safe layer that can take better the heat of a major blessing event. It won't go down straight away to an Ethereum validator, but if you have multiple sets of validator, you're spreading the risk between the whole network itself.
So by reducing slashing risks, it reduces the risk of this massive slashing event, right? Okay, interesting. All right, something else on DVT? All right, so we have 4 minutes to talk about decentralization and rainbow staking. Seems perfectly fine. So Glenn, you said that staking is a constantly evolving industry and that decentralization is a constant journey, is not an end state. It would be interesting to see what are the key decentralization metrics that we should use, and basically how do we know if we have sufficient staker decentralization?
Yes, as I said, it's a journey. It's not an end state because every time we, everything's evolving. So we see Lido was quite dominant, and now that's come down a little bit, but it's still very dominant. With restaking, we see more centralization sort of appearing, but I think the Ethereum community and the ecosystem in general is quite good at regulating itself. So when these things happen, like the recent things about the consensus or execution clients that they came up, that forced a lot of operators to change their or to expedite their shift to a more balanced usage of those execution layer clients. So I think it's just a constant thing that we're always looking out for. These new innovations like restaking, as I said, is brings a lot of people together. But we still see centralization happening within that. But I think us as a community, we can see where those kind of risks and that concentration is, and it tends to even out over time.
So I think just a few things to add. When you think about decentralization, I think it's a nuanced conversation. So you think about Glenn mentioned the client diversity, for instance. I think that's important, but I think there's, as always, as I say, nuance. So one of the issues with client diversity is that we don't actually have certain numbers about which clients folks are running. So on the execution layer side, we have self-reporting, and we get a decent idea from those self-reports who's running what. But there are, of course, errors. Information can be dated. On the consensus layer side, it's more or less the same. There have been some methods, some fingerprinting methods that have been used to try and determine which clients are being used, but it's the same problem. So I think this is a problem that hopefully developers will sort out, but basically find a non-spoofable way to illustrate which client you're using or to admit which client you're using. I believe Nethermind's working on something here, but yeah, some certainty around the numbers would be really helpful so we know where we're at and where we should be moving to. The other thing is, when you look at certain kind of centralization vectors, I think you have to ask yourself, how are they centralizing things? So, you can say, well, there's a lot of stake moving through this one entity, but if that entity is also onboarding DVT, for instance, and making that a standard for the whole market, is it a good thing or a bad thing? And so I think there's just, my point is just that there's a nuance. And like on the DVT side, for instance, you could theoretically have a very concentrated network where, the majority is running on Geth, and on the consensus layer, I don't know, whatever client, let's say Prism, the majority of ETH is run there. But with DVT, if everyone were running through a validator cluster, you could change effectively what the diversification looks like. So my point here is not that client diversification is not important, but it's a very nuanced conversation. And that's, I think.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot more to it than just the client diversification. There's a whole bunch of other stuff which we all know about, like where are these nodes running? Are they all running in Amazon? Are they all running in Google, Microsoft? There's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes into that, so it's quite important.
All right, we have 6 seconds. Super quickly. What is rainbow staking? Super quickly, just because we mentioned it and we can't leave the audience without knowing. So
Okay,
let's be late a little bit.
First and foremost, in like a few seconds here, Barnabé Monod, check out his post on rainbow staking. That's where you're going to get the most information. From a high level, it's just recognizing that you can't force the market into the way you view the world. Today, it's the way that validators look on Ethereum, it's a relic of design decisions that everyone's going to look the same. They're all going to run validators. But rainbow staking is about segmenting those groups. There are large token holders, there are large operators, there are solo stakers, and rainbow staking at the end of the day is about recognizing that and segregating each of those into different duties, different penalties, different rewards. That's high level what rainbow staking is all about. And you can see that with MEV boost and proposer builder separation. It's the same basic concept. You're separating the roles and you're further segregating folks. And it's just recognizing what the market is already telling you.
Great for 50 seconds. Very, very nice. All right, so that's all the time we have. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. No, we got a couple questions if you're ready. All right, cool. So our first question here is, restaking hasn't really taken off in Cosmos and Polkadot. Why will it take off on Ethereum?
I think the proof is in the pudding. I mean, I don't know if you say, is it going to take, sorry? Oh, the point, yeah. Everyone loves points, right? Admittedly, I'm not a huge fan of points, but I think if you look at the data, I mean, 4.5 million ETH has already been engaged on EigenLayer. Some of that's probably related to points. I don't think all of it. Certainly not on the direct side. LSTs potentially just in the sense that you can move more quickly than you can on the direct side. I don't know if you guys had. Yeah,
I agree with Ben, and I think the real uptake or the real adoption will show when we get closer to slashing being implemented to see who runs away, take their points.
Cool. Compared to the Ethereum network rewards, what do you think would be the most lucrative reward source in restaking?
I think
don't all jump at once.
I think it's too early to tell. But I think in the early days, the additional rewards that come through restaking are not going to be that high, just because they'll have a smaller amount of rewards to distribute to a larger number of people, so it's going to be diluted, at least in the early days, so I think it's difficult to predict.
Cool. And what would happen to your protocols if EigenLayer has a critical bug?
To my protocol in particular, nothing. Yeah, actually, yes, exactly.
All right. Should EigenLayer kill the validators, withdraw the ETH, if there is a slashing event, or just keep the money in a big immutable treasury?
I don't love the language "kill the validators."
Fair,
obviously, but I will say that I think that EigenLayer is in a unique position to encourage the behavior it wants to see on the network. So we were just talking about client diversity. Glenn mentioned geographic diversity, things like that. So I do think with the attributable security model, if Eigenlayer itself retained some of the ETH that's taken as penalties, they could also potentially encourage certain behaviors, like they could encourage home validators, they could encourage client diversity, things like that. So I do think there's something there to keeping it, and then, you know, not, I wouldn't say donation, but payments made to encourage healthier things that you'd want to see on the network, I think is possible and interesting.
All right, great. We'll take one more question real quick. What will happen to delegations if Eigenlayer has problems?
To the delegations, actually, I mean that the stakers are, I mean, if Eigenlayer has problems, is what I was speaking about. Actually, as a delegator, what you are doing is taking the risk of those delegates. So obviously, the market, the whole market, or whoever has deposited or interacted with Eigenlayer will be facing that risk and will be eating the consequences, I guess. That is one of the good reasons why those people should diversify and use other things that are not Eigenlayer.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for your knowledge. Let's give them another round of applause.